Harshness of Gor. That's not by the book. Goreans weren't cruel. This is where, unfortunately, a great deal of interactions within the SL by the book Gorean community begins to break down. If a free man is facing slavery, if a free man is facing death, if a free woman is facing punishment by route of being stripped, enslaved, impaled, raped, or anything other than coddled, if a slave is facing punishment by route of being beaten, bloodied, killed, tortured, or anything other than coddled, often anger arises, the roleplay won't be accepted, and you'll hear groaning that these types of actions aren't Gorean. Wrong. Quote, "Perhaps it should only be added that the Gorean master, though strict, is seldom cruel. The girl knows, if she pleases him, her lot will be an easy one. She will almost never encounter sadism or wanton cruelty, for the psychological environment to breed these diseases is largely absent from Gor. This does not mean that she will not expect to be beaten if she disobeys or fails to please her master." End quote. Outlaw of Gor. You'll note the key words are seldom cruel, almost never encounter, and is largely absent. In context, the meaning is that cruelty can be found, can be encountered, and is not completely absent, though it'd be safe to conclude it is not the norm. Quote, "Gratuitous cruelty is far more common on Earth, I fear, than on Gor." End quote. Prize of Gor. Here, the meaningful words to examine are cruelty is far more common on Earth. Breaking that down, the statement points out that there is cruelty in more abundance on Earth, but that yes, it is found on Gor. Quote, "Gorean men, while demanding and severe, are seldom cruel. It is not their nature. That sort of thing, I think, is more common on Earth." End quote. Prize of Gor. This passage says they're seldom cruel, and such behavior is more on Earth, I think. This is an assumption that this sort of thing is seldom done, is not in a Gorean's nature, and is more common on Earth. This is not a fact. Already, a picture is developing to turn the tide away from the onlineism that Goreans are never cruel. So one may ask, surely it would be reserved for free women and slaves primarily. 2, does this mean cruelty should run rampant? Based on the ethos of the genre we submerge ourselves in, it'd be easy to mislead ourselves into such thinking. Cruelty would not be reserved to men and slaves alone, nor would it be prominently seen across Gor, and to be clear, this is not written to argue a free pass to horrific displays of brutal roleplay. However, what is being outlined is simple. Horrible things could and did happen to men and women on Gor, regardless of societal status. So, just how bad could it get for free women? Didn't they get a pass of some degree other than their lives being saved to become enslaved? No. Quote, "If found guilty in the court of the arsenal, the male thief would be sentenced for a week to a year to hard labor in the arsenal or on the wharves. The female thief would be sentenced to service for a week to a year in a straw-strewn cell in one of Port Car's penal brothels." End quote. Hunters of Gor. Quote, "Even when captured by the warriors of an enemy city, the free women will commonly be allowed to retain their veils at least until their final fate has been decided. Sometimes, rather, she, stripped and presented before officers, is offered the choice between swift, honorable decapitation and slavery." End quote. Blood Brothers of Gor. Quote, "Lady Claudia shuddered. In such an impalement, the female is usually simply set upon the spear. It is not necessary to bind them, as, straightened, they cannot reach the spear, nor obtain any leverage for removing themselves from it. They are held upon it, helplessly, by their own weight. Usually such a fate is visited only upon free women. It is thought that it gives them time to consider and repent their ways. A slave girl, on the other hand, would be more likely, like meat, to be thrown to sleen. End quote. Renegades of Gor. With only these few excerpts given, a more robust picture forms for us that free women were not absolved from enduring punishments and experiencing savage predicaments. Enslavement, remittance to brothels, impalement, decapitation, ear-notching, public nudity, humiliation, slaying, etc. Even the female of Gor may find that a quick death, such as beheading, is the most humane ending to her suffering physically as well as psychologically. While free women suffered grave situations, as just explored, free men are normally exposed to even more heinous maltreatment. Quote, "If he should kill me, see then that he dies a lengthy, unpleasant death." "Yes," said more than one, almost eagerly. As with most Goreans, they did not much care for traitors. Prize of Gor. Again we see a man may have his death dragged out, rather than ended swiftly. Quote, "The next fellow had lied about his taxes. He would be hung, a hook through his tongue in market." End quote. Explorers of Gor. Quote, "As was wise, I avoided cities in my long journey, though I passed several, for to enter a city without permission, or without satisfactory reason, is tantamount to a capital crime, and the punishment is usually a swift and brutal impalement. Pikes on the walls of Gorean cities are often surmounted with the remains of unwelcome guests." End quote. Outlaws of Gor. The men in these quotes endured many catastrophes, all prescribed as not only Gorean, but as honorable and acceptable, unlike characters such as Service and the acts he is known to carry out. Quote, "I had heard the name of Service. It was well known among the pirate captains of Port Car, scourge of gleaming Thassa. He was pirate indeed, and slaver, and murderer and thief, cruel and worthless a man, abominable, truly Port Car. I felt little but disgust." End quote. Raiders of Gor. What a wide range of allowable deaths and punishments, not even associated with battle. Hanging, sporting with someone to lengthen their experience, snapping of vertebrae, being eaten by water Tharlarian, or maybe getting quartered or trampled to death by Tharlarian. Tarns could be used to pull one apart, leech torture and execution. Being hung with a hook through a tongue, burnt to death by Tharlarian oil, impalement, stretched on racks, the use of the frame of humiliation, eyes blinded by hot irons, and so on. What of slaves, then? They're people too, after all. Incorrect. Slaves, even when cherished, are legally without any protection or rights, being given beneath animals. Perhaps it is them who receive some of the most abhorrent treatment. Quote, "In R, as on Gor generally, a slave, on threat of torture and impalement, must endure whatever abuse a free person cares to inflict on him." End quote. Assassins of Gor. Girls are beaten and raped, not ravished, but raped. There is definitely two definitions of the word as Norman describes them in the novels. Odd, but we must remember we are discussing the Gorean world and mentalities, not what we know and experience in the real world. After studying the passages provided, there is no shortage of nefarious deeds being executed. We witness the use of penalty brands, the slave box that left the individual cramped on the verge of muscular atrophy and weakened her mental constitution, far more sadistic than being fed to canal urts and sleen. It, however, does not stand alone in its depravity of traumatizing the chattel. There is the act of putting them to ore, using them as bait for tarns and sleen, and one of the most profoundly despicable acts may be what is done to innocent human beings from the pleasure gardens. Quote, "They are raised in complete ignorance," said Ho-Tu. "They do not even know they are women. I listened to the music of the lute, and it was disturbed. Their life is very pleasant and very easy," said Ho-Tu. They have no duties other than to seek their own pleasure. And then? I asked. They are very expensive, said Ho-Tu. Normally, the agent of an Ubar, who has been victorious in battle, will purchase one for his high officers, to be brought to the victory feast. Ho-Tu looked at me. The attendants, when the girl is purchased, give her a drug in her food that night, and remove her from the gardens. She is kept unconscious. She will be revived at the height of the Ubar's victory feast, commonly to find herself unclothed in a cage of male slaves, set up among the tables. I looked back at the girls through the glass. Not infrequently, said Ho-Tu. They go mad, and are slain the following morning. End quote. Assassin of Gor. In conclusion, while no one should expect nor tolerate rampant, unchecked dark roleplay, it should categorically occur to some degree. It is, by the book, honorable and Gorean. Not only as players is it urged to keep a strong IC and OC separation over what happens to their characters, it behooves them to leave the mentality of abuse and what is not acceptable in their current society at the door, and delve richly and fully into the world of Gor. Doing so opens more roleplays, allows you interaction with a broader base of players, and there will be ultimately a lot less angst, invalids, and onlineisms circulating. When is Gor too harsh? Also known as Big Bat Little Fly. Number 1. When you are a new to Gor player and honestly didn't know any better. It's simply not fair to a new player to visit a level of harshness that may significantly derail their character because they didn't know every nuance of 33 really boring books. 2. When you are new to a sim, it can be really off-putting. Yes, this is true, and I would hope players would have enough sense to let you get to look around the sim before scaring you off. But don't be a baby either. Visiting other cities was a dangerous action. 3. When you get no warning ICly. It is beyond the pale when someone comes at you with a harsh response in character on their first or second post, giving you no chance to modify, explain, backpedal, or otherwise avoid the action. 4. When warning comes in a negative thought emote. It's not helpful to correct or warn of behavior via a thought emote. Either make it a clear statement, or I am the player. Thought emotes are not useful in these situations. 5. When the other player God modes you. No matter what the other player has in mind, you have the right to your reactions, no matter the situation. 6. When it's good for the goose but not for the gander. When a player lets one person break an IC action, but then turns around and uses that same action against someone else. This always smacks of hypocrisy. Be fair as to your character's actions against others. 7. When you cannot win. There are some players that will force you down a path towards cruelty that has nothing to do with your valid attempts at avoiding it. For whatever the reasons are, it sucks, and you have as much right to avoid or win in a situation as they have. If you think this is happening, it's a good time to stop, and ask someone to roll dice for each event. 8. When all you get back is smack talk. I don't even get why some women don't seem to grasp the idea that it is a bad idea to poke a large, burly man when he's grumpy. Every Freeruin in the books who did this ended up in a collar. Please have enough sense to find some other line than snarky arrogance if you want the story to go some other way. Lastly, while it is frustrating when you receive pushback for IC laws you know you are right, that is not a cause for coming out of roleplay and getting upset OOC. IC laws are there to be enforced, broken, patrolled, and corrected in character.